There's a new Formula 1 World Championship leader after the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, a weekend that revealed a lot more than just that. So here's everything we learned from Jeddah. For the first time in 2025, the race winner wasn't the driver who started from pole position. Oscar Piastri's brilliant getaway from the front row and the first corner shenanigans that triggered the penalty for Max Verstappen meant it was Piastri who broke the pole to victory trend. However, that doesn't get away from the growing belief that F1 2025 is turning into a dirty air championship, because Piastri's win wasn't the result of him overtaking or undercutting the leader in pure pace terms. Verstappen's penalty ultimately decided the outcome. In the opening phase of the race, Piastri couldn't get close enough to Verstappen, and most likely as the result of extra sliding caused by his pursuit of the Red Bull, it was the Australian's tyres that gave up first. This has highlighted that although things are so close at the front, turbulent wake from the cars ahead is hampering the ability for close racing, and anyone who tries to overcome it in their pursuit of a pass finds their tyres overheating. With there being no chance of the cars being tweaked over the remainder of the campaign, the stage is set for qualifying and the charge to the first corner to be the most decisive moments of each F1 weekend. With the focus on Verstappen's penalty, other details of the start and first corner were relegated to footnotes or seemingly forgotten entirely. But it shouldn't go unnoticed that Piastri passed a major test to claim the championship lead, and not just by winning a race he was probably third quickest at, behind Lando Norris and Verstappen. Piastri has had some experience racing Verstappen already in F1, so this was not his first chance to be tested against the grid's most ruthless racer, but it was probably the highest the stakes have been. On the front row together, the knowledge that who came out of turn 1 ahead would probably win, and the wider context of a massive chance to take that championship lead. To face that and ace the start with Verstappen's only being average, to quote his team boss Christian Horner, then stand his ground into turn 1 was a great example of Piastri's composure and his own ruthlessness. He gave as good as Verstappen's rivals usually get, then managed a tense race to win without fault. Piastri's win was McLaren's fourth in 5 races so far this year, but there was something unique about this one. For the first time, McLaren didn't appear to have the fastest race car. Having been well clear in Australia, China and Bahrain, even when McLaren lost out to Verstappen in Japan, the consensus was that the MCL39 had the ultimate pace, but was beaten because its drivers couldn't find a way past the leader. Jeddah was a different story. On a weekend when tyre temperature management was important, so McLaren's advantage should have been clear, Red Bull was every bit a match for it, and potentially even better. McLaren had been miles ahead in the hot daytime practice sessions, but over the race distance, it was Piastri's medium tyres that rolled over first in the opening stint, and then Verstappen's final push to the flag allowed him to close up at the end. The margins may have been minimal, but considering just a few weeks ago people were talking about McLaren easily controlling races from the front to win by 20 seconds or more, it appears that Red Bull could now be an equal, at least at the right track. Norris couldn't replicate his Bahrain recovery to the podium after giving himself a little too much work to do with a bigger error and worse grid position in Jeddah, the only track he's still yet to out-qualify Piastri on. Norris paid the price for what McLaren calls another episode in getting caught out by its car at the limit, and now both team and driver have admitted Norris really needs to rein it in qualifying slightly to cut back the errors while the car is like it is. Norris was the favourite for pole and victory, but took what he described as a silly risk in Q3, carrying way too much speed into turn 4 and understeering slightly onto the exit curb, which spat him into the wall. McLaren has noticed that Norris keeps being surprised by the behaviour of the car when it's pushed for the final milliseconds in qualifying, which stems from it becoming a little harder for the drivers to feel and understand. But Norris is inducing more errors and not mitigating the risk of the car catching him out as well as Piastri. He can obviously be very quick, but is currently more prone to mistakes, and this needs to be toned down. Mercedes' great strength this year has been how consistently good its car has been, so it did not expect its worst performance so far in Saudi Arabia after an expectation to challenge for the podium faded into a distant 5th and 6th. George Russell finished further behind the race winner than at any other Grand Prix this season, almost half a minute adrift of Piastri, and there were no immediate explanations for Russell's tyre blister and the excessive management both cars needed. Russell and Kimi Antonelli struggled with overheating on both compounds, suffering on the front and rear axles when they pushed harder. Russell said the drop-off was massive and that he fell off the cliff, and that Mercedes needs to understand why this played out as badly as it did. Plus, while Mercedes had anticipated a deficit to McLaren in Jeddah, it was caught out by the extent of its struggles relative to Red Bull and even Ferrari, with team boss Toto Wolff calling that an additional negative. Lewis Hamilton started the Saudi Arabian weekend optimistic that he'd made a breakthrough in driving style understanding in Bahrain. but he ended the weekend admitting there were zero positives for him beyond his teammate Charles Leclerc's third place. This was comfortably Hamilton's worst weekend for Ferrari. After Friday practice, he was simply hoping he could break into the top 10, then after making Q3 with a margin of just 0.07 of a second, he qualified over half a second slower than Leclerc. Hamilton started and finished 7th, but showed little pace throughout. He lacks confidence in the rear end in the high-speed corners, a characteristic Leclerc is tolerating as it mitigates the understeer that sets in later in the corner. Hamilton struggled with the tyres in the race, was inconsistent even in the slower corners, and continues to struggle most when pushing for that extra fraction at the business end of Q3. He says he's tried to change the car to suit his traditional style, but now concedes it's about adapting the way he's driving. Whether he can do that is something Hamilton himself sounds uncertain about. The Japan, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia triple header was a baptism of fire for Yuki Tsunoda after his sudden promotion to Red Bull Racing, and it ended disappointingly with an avoidable first lap crash that cost him a chance at a good points finish. He's shown promise, and even in Jeddah, where he was a massive 9/10 off Verstappen in qualifying, that margin exaggerated the pace deficit. But he admits he doesn't yet fully understand a tricky car that regularly catches him out. While Tsunoda hasn't pieced together a weekend where he's maximised his potential, he's convinced the team that he can crack it, and even at his worst, he's been a significant upgrade on the man he replaced, Liam Lawson. Now Tsunoda has the chance to have what's effectively his pre-season preparation with Red Bull. On Tuesday he'll be at Red Bull's Milton Keynes base for simulator work, then on Wednesday he'll drive the 2023 car at Silverstone. This will give him a chance for a full day focused on his understanding of a related car, experimenting with setups and driving techniques in a bid to move more quickly along his learning curve. That should mean he's ready for a step forward come the next race in Miami. Carlos Sainz picked a great time to have his best qualifying in Saudi Arabia and finally put together a complete weekend with his new team. After a tricky start to life at Williams, Sainz was closer to Alex Albon in Japan and made it to Q3 for the first time in Bahrain. But this was the first time the real Sainz showed up from start to finish, as he shone in qualifying, picked his battles better in the race, and managed a strong points finish with relative ease, backed up ably by Albon. Sainz felt very happy with a very solid weekend, in which a double points finish with him 8th and Albon 9th moved Williams to 5th in the Constructors' Championship. It was secured by Sainz, allowing Albon to have a tow and DRS to ward off a charging Isack Hadjar behind. Sainz said it was a little tense knowing he couldn't afford to make a single mistake, but admitted it was the right call, while Albon was also satisfied after recovering from fractionally missing out on Q3 to bag his 4th points finish in 5 races, despite having to navigate the final stint in Sainz's dirty air. Lance Stroll set a new Q1 exit record in Saudi Arabia, failing to get out of the first segment for the 75th time. He tried to brush it off by pointing out it's car dependent, and if you put the McLaren drivers in a Sauber for 10 years, they will have the most Q1 exits, which is true to a point, although Stroll holds at least some of the responsibility. For some perspective, Stroll's teammates have 47 Q1 exits to his 75 and 74 Q3 appearances to his 40, so it would be disingenuous to say that Stroll's qualifying record is solely down to inferior machinery. What is fair to say after Jeddah is that while this was a Q1 exit and it is a new record, it didn't really do him justice this weekend. Stroll was within a tenth of Fernando Alonso, hardly an egregious deficit or as bad as the last couple of races before that. It's just this car isn't that good. And while Stroll could be doing a better job overall, it's still the case that the car is by far the bigger problem. The highest placed rookie in F1 so far is unsurprisingly Kimi Antonelli, and the best performing is probably Ollie Bearman given his points record in the Haas and early form against teammate Esteban Ocon. But the most surprising, that has to be Isack Hadjar, who has excelled despite his lack of F1 preparation relative to all the others except maybe Gabriel Bortoleto. Hadjar's pace has been eye-catching since race 1 in Australia, and his recovery since shunting in the wet on the formation lap there has been impressive. Scoring his first F1 points at Suzuka was already a fine feat, but he felt his 10th place in Saudi Arabia was a perfect race, and it was a bit harsh to only get 1 point from it. Qualifying had been tricky as Hadjar had lacked a little pace relative to a rejuvenated Liam Lawson, but turned that around with a strong first lap despite starting on hard tyres, then executed that alternate strategy very well and was only denied a better result by the Williams DRS train tactic. Another race yielded another one-stopper despite Pirelli coming to Saudi Arabia with a deliberately softer choice of tyres in a bid to open up strategy options. The idea was that with more heavily degrading tyres, teams would be forced to make a greater number of pit stops. Sounds simple, but things didn't play out that way. The 2025 spec tyres proved once again to be pretty robust. Already from the first running on Friday, it had been clear that the one-stop was going to be the best option because degradation was so low. The need for strategic variation is becoming more important, but so far things seem to be heading in a different direction. Pirelli's new softest compound, the super aggressive C6, could be a litmus test when it appears for the first time at May's Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Should things not get spiced up there, F1 chiefs and Pirelli will see if they need to do something different to stop this worrying trend.